You can code in HTML and CSS and know some JavaScript basics, but still you can't code dynamic web pages because HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript are not enough to create web pages with rich user experience. So something is missing. And what is that? That missing part is actually called DOM. DOM means Document Object Model. It's an API or a tool that enables the HTML manipulation via the JavaScript. So the JavaScript itself can't help you to create web pages of dynamic nature. To create such dynamic pages, you need to combine your JavaScript basics with the DOM. So if you're intending to learn the DOM, then you are at the right place. This course is all about the DOM, Document Object Model. And just in short period of time, you will learn all the aspects of the DOM and start creating dynamic web pages. So everybody, my name is Salar and I will be your instructor in this course. So let me tell you some important features of this course before we move on. This entire course is divided into different lectures so that you have better check on your progress. Lecture 1 is about DOM introduction. In lecture 2, you will learn how to do DOM selection. Lecture 3 is about DOM traversal. In lecture number 4, you will learn to make changes to the DOM. In lecture 5, we'll talk about attributes. In lecture 6, you will learn to manipulate classes. In lecture 7, you will learn to modify and apply CSS via DOM. Lecture number 8 is the last lecture. We will learn to code DOM events. DOM events is an extremely important topic. If you miss that one, you miss everything. Because with events, we implement the DOM. We implement dynamic features. So this is our entire course and the outline. And in addition to this course, there is another lecture I would like to recommend. And that lecture is about practically implement the DOM and develop some useful applications. So my recommendation is after taking all the lectures of this course, you will take another lecture. And the name of the lecture is 10 DOM manipulation tasks. You can find the lecture on my channel and the link is also provided in the description. In this course, we will try to code together. All the HTML files I will be using can be downloaded. Check the description of the video and grab the download link. Remember one thing, programming is a practical subject. You can't just learn programming by watching and listening. You have to code and you have to program by yourself. So these were some important features of this course. I have nothing more to say. So let's now move on and start working with the DOM. In the first lecture, you will learn what is DOM, where is DOM, and DOM terminologies. So what's DOM? Let's try to define the term DOM. DOM is an application interface. An application interface helps to softwares to communicate or exchange data with each other. So using DOM, JavaScript can communicate with the HTML. So the DOM basically creates a communication channel for the HTML in the JavaScript. In addition, DOM provides a lot of methods and properties to manipulate the HTML. JavaScript uses DOM's methods and properties. So DOM is like a service provider. It doesn't do any manipulation. Manipulation is done by the JavaScript. JavaScript uses DOM's methods and properties to add, remove, and change the HTML. So via DOM, JavaScript gets access to the HTML. So now you know what is DOM. Move on to the next question. Where is DOM? DOM is in the browser, and let me show you how to find it. So here we have a web page, and this web page has a source code that you can see in the code editor. So this is our HTML document, or you can also call it source code. So to find the DOM, you need to open a dev tool. Right click somewhere on the page and then select inspect. Now in the dev tool, under the elements tab, you see the same document, the same code that we have in our code editor. So this document under the Elements tab is DOM. The code in the DOM document is the same as editor, but the nature of the code is different. In the editor, we have source code. Here, we have document code. So whenever you run your source code in the browser, this DOM document is created. The browser creates the document. You don't need to do anything. So this is a DOM document, and JavaScript has full access to this one. In other words, this is the document JavaScript manipulates. JavaScript, with the help of DOM's methods and properties, make changes in this document. All the changes appears immediately here on the web. For example, using this DOM document, I can change the text to something like this. And here you can see the change in the text. I can also apply CSS. So let me show you an example. So I put a background color, and here you can see the change. Now remember one thing here. These changes are made in the DOM document, not in the source code. As you can see, our source code is intact. So the changes are not made in the source code. It's only here in the document. And that's why when we refresh the page, all the changes we made are gone. So the changes we make in the document are not consistent or permanent, but they can be made permanent using the DOM events. So that was the DOM document. Let's now learn DOM terminologies. DOM uses its own terminologies. The whole DOM document is gathered under a document object. So in the Console tab, if I write a command document, then you will see the whole document page. As you can see, the whole document, all the HTML is gathered under the document object. This DOM document can also be seen as DOM tree, just like you see in the picture, where the document is the first and the outermost element, and the entire HTML is gathered under the document object. In a DOM tree, every element is called node. Node is an important term. So the elements in a DOM tree are called nodes. But it doesn't stop here. The text content of the element is also node. Even the attributes are also nodes in the DOM tree. In short, everything is a node in the DOM document. These nodes are also divided into different types. We have element nodes, we have text nodes, and attribute nodes. Element nodes represent HTML elements like HTML, body, div, paragraph, etc. Text nodes represent text content within HTML elements, like the text inside a paragraph or a heading. And the attribute nodes represent attributes of the HTML elements, like class and ID attributes. Document is also a node. It's called document node. Document node, as we have seen earlier, represents the entire HTML document. And there is only one document node for each HTML page. So these were the terms and terminologies that we use while working with the DOM. And now you are familiar with them. So in this lecture, you learned what is DOM, where is DOM in DOM terminologies. And I believe it's now right time to move on to the next lecture. In the next lecture, you will learn DOM selection. DOM selection simply means to select the elements or the nodes from the DOM document. And this is the first step towards the manipulation. We select or grab an element and start working on it. To select the elements, we have several different DOMs methods, which are used in different scenarios and with different HTML structures. These methods are getElement by ID, querySelector all, getElements by name, getElements by tag name, and getElements by class name. So these are the 6 methods we use to select HTML from the DOM document. The first 3 methods get used a lot. but the others are also important and we'll learn all of them. So let's start with the first method, get element by ID, and have some hands-on action. I've got a simple HTML with a header containing an image and navigations. So the method get element by ID allows you to grab a specific HTML element by using its unique ID. So in a page with tons of HTML elements, you can pinpoint a specific element using the method get element by ID. In HTML, you can see our image element has an ID, logo, and the first anchor element also has an ID, main page. So using these ID values, we can select both the elements in the JavaScript using the get element by ID method. So let's see this method in action. I'm going to select both the elements, the image element and the anchor element. So here you see the method in action. The method belongs to the document object. It can't be called without the reference. Into the method, we pass the ID of the element we want to grab, like logo and main page. The method's gonna return the element if the ID is found, and that element is then assigned to the variable. So let's check the cancel to see what do we get there. And here we have both the elements in the cancel. So after the selection, both the elements are available for the JavaScript. JavaScript can work on it. So that was the get element by ID method. It's simple and straightforward. Now next we have query selector. Query selector is also a very useful method. It allows you to select an element based on its CSS selector. That means to the query selector method, you'll write the same selector that you use in the CSS for selecting the element. For example, in the CSS, you can select this image element using class selector, ID selector, or maybe the descendant selector. So the CSS selector is used in the query selector method and it will give you the element. So let me show you a couple of examples. I will select this image element with the help of query selector method and by providing different selectors. So here you see, to the query selector method, I pass the class selector of the image element. And so you see in the cancel, we got the element, right? Now, instead of class selector, you can also use the ID selector because the element has an ID. You will get the same result, or you can write the descendant selector like this. So to the method, you will code the same selector that you use in the CSS. Let's now move on. In HTML, several elements may have the same class or the same selector. So in this case, where a single selector selects multiple elements, query selector gonna give you the first match. For example, to the selector method, if I provide a selector menu item, so in this case, query selector gonna give you the first match, the first element that matches the selector. And you see the first anchor element is returned by the method. So let's continue from here to the next one. The next method is query selector all method. It's also very useful. Query selector all is an advanced version of query selector. It will find all the elements that match a CSS selector. In the previous case, the selector menu item matches the 4 elements, but we got the first match using the query selector method. But if I use query selector all, I will get return all the elements. So let's code this method and then we'll discuss more about it. Here we go. So the selector menu item has 4 matches. So we get 4 different elements. The first 4 anchor elements. So the return type isn't a single element. It can be more than one. So what do you think? What would be the type of this variable? A simple variable can't hold multiple values, and you know that. To save multiple values, we normally use array-like structure. So this variable is not a normal variable. It's a special variable which is called node list. In other words, a list of nodes. So it's an array-like structure, not the array. In the console, you will now see a node list with indices. And now here see a node list with 4 components. So all the 4 anchor elements are now in this array-like structure, node list. And using the indices, you can see here, you can loop through this list structure. And you can also have access to the individual element. And we usually use for each function to loop through all the components of the node list. So let me show you an example. I will apply the for each function to the list and loop through all the components, all the elements. So as we loop through all the components one by one, so we can perform any operations. So let's just say I want to count the number of characters to the text like home, services, about, and contacts. So in HTML, I'm going to return the text node. Into the text node, we are applying the length property. So let me refresh the page. And here you see the character count of the text, or the text node that we have. So these were the 3 most commonly used selection methods. Let's now move on. Next we have get elements by name. This method is also very handy, and you're going to need it in several different situations. The method returns several HTML elements like query select all. When you observe the name, you see elements, right? Plural. So it returns several elements by their name. In order to demonstrate the method and give you a piece of example, I need to set up some more HTML. So hold on a second and let me put some more HTML. Now I see some more HTML. We have 5 different radio buttons, and I will select all of them using the method getElementsByName. So the method getElementsByName gets elements by their given name. Given name means the name that we give to the element using the name attribute. Input is also a name, but it's a tag name. This one is the given name. So the elements by name method grabs the element with given name. Now you can see all the input elements have the same given name, rate. So I can use this name in the method to select all of them. So let's see a code example. Into the method, we pass the name. Simple as that. Let's take the console. Now you see once again a node list with 5 components, 5 elements, and they have their own indices. And using the for each function, we can walk through the list and perform operations. Let me show you an example on that. As you can see, one radio button is checked by default. And using JavaScript, we can find out the value of the checked button. So as I have all the input elements in the list, so I can simply apply for each function loop on it. As you walk through the components of the list, I will look for the checked component or checked radio button. So we are reading value of the checked radio button. And in our code, OK radio button is checked, as you can see here, and this is the value we are trying to read here. And so you see in the output, if another radio button is checked, let's say and the last one, our program gonna read its value. So let's refresh the page. Now the button very good is checked and its value is read by the JavaScript. So that was get elements by name method. Let's now move on. Our next method is get elements by tag name. The name of the method reveals almost everything about its doing. It returns elements by tag name. Tag name means the name of the HTML element, not the given name. This is the tag name. Div is the tag name. Or anchor is the tag name. So we provide a tag name to the method and it returns all the tags that we have in the document. Now let's say if I want to select all the anchor elements in a page, so I will code like into the method, I will pass the name of the tag. Now the method gonna return all the anchor elements that we have. And not only these anchor elements, if you have others in the page, you will get them also. For example, except these 5 anchor elements, I put 2 more at the end of the page, right? So I will get these 2 also, all of them. So let's print the variable in the console and study the result. Now in the console, you won't see a node list as before. You would rather see another array-like structure which is called HTML collection. So let me refresh the page. Now you see HTML collection which is also an array-like structure containing all the 7 anchor elements. And all the elements have their own indices. The HTML collection differs from the node list in 2 different ways. Number 1, node list is a node list. It contains all the nodes an element can have, like text node, attribute node, comment node, etc. But this is not the main difference. The main difference between the HTML collection and the node list is that HTML collection is live while the node list is static. So what does it mean? It means whenever you add or remove the specified element, this HTML collection is gonna automatically update itself because the collection is live. On the other hand, node list is static. It doesn't update itself automatically at the time when you add or remove elements. So that is the main difference. HTML collection is live, whereas the node list is static. So that was the get elements by tag name method, and you will use it to select all the same type elements on a page. Let's say you want to apply the same style to all the paragraphs on a page, then you can select them using the get elements by tag name method. So let's now move on to the last one. Our last method is get elements by class name. This method is also important and handy. It returns the elements by their class name or names. You can also specify more than one name. Now let's say I want to select all the elements on a page with class menu item. So here we have 4 elements with the class menu items, and down there, here we have 2 more. So in the JavaScript, we will write into the method, we provide the name of the class. So all the elements on the page with the class menu item are now selected. And the return type of this method is also our HTML collection. So let's first check the result in the console. Let me refresh the page. Now down there, you can see an HTML collection with 6 elements. So all the elements with the class menu item are now selected. And the return type is HTML collection, which is a live collection. To the method, you can also pass multiple classes. So let me show you an example on that before we wind up this lecture. In the HTML, a group of elements can have their own classes as well as share classes. For example, our first 4 anchor elements share a same class, menu item. They don't have their own specific class, right? So I can assign a specific class to the element. Let's say 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are specific classes to the elements. However, the menu item is the common class. So to the method get elements by class name, we can pass multiple classes. Let's say I want to select the elements have classes menu item 1, right? So these are 2 classes. So I'm going to just pass the classes to the method, just like this. So you see, method can also accept multiple classes. So all the elements with these two classes are now selected. But as for now, in our case, there is only one element. And so you see in the output, HTML collection containing only the one element with class menu item 1, right? So my dear listeners, that was all about DOM selection. As you can see, DOM provides a vast variety of selection methods. All of them are important. They have their own functions and they are good in their own way. So now you know how to select the DOM. In the next lecture, you will learn how to traverse the DOM and select parent, child, and sibling nodes. DOM traversal simply means walk through the DOM or walk through the DOM tree and find root elements, parent, children, and sibling nodes. In order to find root elements and the other nodes like parent, children, and siblings, DOM provide a bunch of properties. So we're going to look at the properties we have to traverse the DOM. So let's move on. I'll be using this basic HTML in this lecture. And if you want to practice together, you can download this HTML from the link in the description, or you can write your own HTML. Now, in DOM traversal, the first thing that we usually learn is identify root elements. Every HTML page of the DOM document has three root elements: the HTML, the head, and the body. So the HTML head and body are root elements. They are very common. They are the part of every web page. And that's why they have their own selection properties. Own selection property means you can select them just by calling their properties. You don't need to code any selection method like get element by ID or query selector. They can be directly selected by their properties. Let me show you the properties in the console first, and then we'll come back and try to manipulate the HTML using the properties. This is the result for HTML, and here we have the console. Previously, we have learned the entire HTML is gathered under the document node or the document object. And that's why when we write the document in the console, the entire HTML of the page is returned, right? You can see the entire HTML is gathered under the document object. So the document is the topmost node in the DOM tree, and it's also a read-only property or a command. Writing the document in the console means we are trying to read it, and when we try to read it, it returns the entire document because it represents the document. The same way HTML has its own property. If I want to read the HTML, only the HTML, not the entire document, then I will use that property. The name of the property is document element, and here you see the property. Now you can see the document element property returns only the HTML page. In the first option, you got the entire document. Here you can see, for example, the doc type, but the doc type is not returned here because doc type isn't a part of the HTML. Doc type is part of the document. So to select the HTML document, we have document element property. And to select only the head section of the page, we have head property. So let me call it. Now you can see only the head of the document is returned. To get only the body, we have body property. Now you can see only the body of the document is returned. So HTML, head, and body are three root elements. And to select them or pinpoint them, we have properties. Now coming back in the code. Here I will show you how to use the properties to manipulate the HTML or to manipulate the document. Let's say I want to apply a background color to the HTML. So I will write So here you see, using the property, we can directly access to the HTML document. And here I'm applying CSS background color via JavaScript. We can also select the body. So the body can also be selected using its property. If I refresh the page, you will see the difference, right? And you can see in the DOM document, HTML is applied background color and the body is applied text color. So that was the first point, to select root elements. So move on to the next one. In a DOM document, there are some relationships. Nodes can be parent, children, or siblings. A single node can be a parent as well as a child at the same time. So let me show you first how these relationships are built in a DOM document. So this is our HTML, and here we have all the nodes. Here we have parent nodes, children nodes, and sibling nodes. However, it's hard to find or pinpoint them when we have the code like this. But when I change this code in a tree-like structure, then it would be easier for us to study the relationships. So here we go. Now you see the DOM tree of HTML. In the tree, if we start from the HTML node, so we can say HTML is the parent of head and body, because HTML is exactly one level up to the head and the body. Head and body are two children. At the same time, they are siblings because they share the same parent, HTML. So you see how nodes are related to each other. Now consider the body node and try to figure out some more relationships. Body is a child of the HTML, but at the same time, body is a parent for H1, paragraph, H2, another list, and script node. So all these nodes are exactly one level down from the body. So they are children of the body, and all the children are obviously siblings. So H1, paragraph, H2, list, and the script are siblings. If you go deep down the tree, you'll discover more parent, child, and sibling nodes. For example, the list UL is a parent and it has 3 children, 3 LI nodes. So this is how relationships are built in a DOM tree. Now we know how nodes relate to each other. So to select the parent of any node or children or siblings, we have properties. We use the properties and select them. So let's start with the parent node. To select the parent node of any element, we have parent node property. Now let's say I want to select the parent of the body, so I can write. So here I'm using two different properties. The body property, I'm going to select the body, and to the body we apply parent node property. So it's going to return the parent of the body. So let's log the variable, refresh the page, and here you see. So here you see the HTML, which is the parent of the body. Now let's say I want to find the parent of this paragraph. So I need to select the paragraph first. So here I grabbed the paragraph first, and to the paragraph I applied parent node property. And we know the body is the parent of the paragraph. Refresh the page, and here you see the parent, right? Body is the parent. So to select the parent node, you will use parent node property. The next we have children nodes. And here we have three properties which we can use to select children of any element. And those properties are child nodes, first child, and last child. So these properties are used to select children. The first one is the child nodes, and it returns every child of a selected node. For example, here our UL has 3 children. So let's grab all the children of the UL using the child nodes property. We will grab the UL first using its ID. Now to the UL, we can apply child nodes property. So here we have all the children of the UL. And here we got a node list with all the children, text node and li node. But if you look closer to the output, you will see something is weird. We have 3 li nodes, so there should be 3 text nodes, one for each. So we are getting one extra text node. So what is that extra text node? This is because of the indentation. So the indentation that we have between the elements is also considered a text node in the DOM document, right? So here we have all the children selected in the JavaScript. And remember another thing, this node list is live, just like HTML collection. So you can do some more experiments with the child nodes property. Apply it to the body and study the result. What do you get there? Move on. Next two properties are pretty simple. First child selects the first one, last child selects the last one. So selection can be done using these properties. But after the selection, we usually perform manipulation. And that manipulation part can be problematic because of the text nodes. Let's say if I want to put a different background color to all the list items here, so I can't simply loop through all the children and apply the background because background property works on element, not on the text. So let me give you a demonstration. To the UL, I select the first child, and to the first child, I apply the background, let's say yellow. So before I refresh the page, I want you to notice the first child. The first child is a text node, li is the second child, and we are trying to apply background to the text node, to the first child. So as I refresh the page, you see the error, right? So the background can't be applied to the text. So it's not so simple to manipulate the result from these properties. We must get rid of the text nodes. Text nodes are problematic. So what alternatives do we have to remove the text nodes and get only the element nodes? We actually have more children properties to select only the element children. And those properties are children, first element child, and last element child. So these three properties are gonna filter out the text nodes and you only get the element nodes. So as I apply the children property to the UL, I'll get the LI elements, only the LI elements without the text nodes. So let's check it out. Now refresh the page and here you see a live list containing only 3 li elements, children. And instead of first child, I will use first element child. So for example, to the UL, I will apply first element child. The first element child gonna select the first child. The last element child gonna select the last child. Now here we see a background yellow to the first child. And here you see the output, right? So my recommendation is use these properties to work with the children. Let's now move on. Now we have sibling nodes. How do we get the sibling nodes? For siblings, we also have two different set of properties, just like children. So let me put all the properties on the screen and then we'll talk more about them. So these are the properties we have to work with the siblings. In the first set, we have previous sibling and next sibling. The previous and next sibling work the same way as child nodes, first child and last child. That means if you use previous and next sibling, you will get the sibling element as well as their text nodes. So these two properties are problematic and we don't want siblings text nodes. We will use the next set of properties, previous element sibling and next element sibling. So here we only get the element sibling node and these are our options. So let me show you an example before we end this lecture. In HTML, this li is in the middle. It has both the siblings, the previous and the next. So to select the previous and the next sibling of this middle li, we will code like so here we have all the children and we grabbed them earlier right here. So from the list of the children, I am selecting the middle one using the index value. So the child in the middle is at index 1, 0, 1, 2, right? And using the middle child, we can select its sibling, previous and next. For a previous sibling, we will call previous element sibling. Let's put another style to the sibling. And now the next sibling. Now you will see the previous and the next sibling have different text color. Let me refresh the page. And here you can see the output. The text color is change to the previous and the next sibling. So, my dear listeners, now we have thoroughly covered DOM traversal. DOM traversal simply means to find the root elements like HTML, head, and body, as well as walk through the tree and look for parents, children, and siblings. Now you have good understanding of DOM structure, selection, and traversal. So you can proceed further to the next lecture. In the next lecture, you will learn how to make changes to the DOM by creating new nodes, adding new nodes, and removing nodes from the DOM tree. I'll see you there. Stay tuned. Make changes to the DOM. This is where things start becoming dynamic. We create new nodes and add them to the DOM document. We change the text content, replace the older nodes with the new one, and sometimes we totally remove the nodes. So these are the changes we usually make to the DOM. And the changes result in a way that our page become dynamic. So this lecture is all about making changes to the DOM by creating new nodes, by changing the text content, by adding new nodes and replacing the old ones, and by totally removing the nodes. So let's learn to do that and see how do we create new nodes. In order to create new nodes, we have two different methods. Create element creates an element node like paragraph element or the div element, etc. Right? The second method is create text node. This method simply creates a text node that you can assign to any element. So these are the two methods we usually use to create new nodes. The create element method gets used a lot because it generates the HTML. However, the create text node method is rarely used because to create a text node or to change the text content of a node, we have some properties which are very convenient to use and call. So instead of using the method create text node in order to create a text node, we usually prefer to use the properties. But we aren't going to ignore this method. We will code it and study it. Let's start with the create element method. This method creates a new element, a brand new element, like the paragraph, div, UL, li, script, etc. So using the DOM, you can create new HTML. So let's say I want to create a new paragraph element. So I will call the method in a way like this, and the type of the element I want to create is paragraph. So this line of code is going to create an empty paragraph element just like this. In addition to the paragraph, I also want to create a li element. So I will code something like this. And now the tag name is li. So an empty li is created by this line of code. So let's print both the variable in the console and see what do we get there. In the console, you can see we have successfully created two new elements, but they're empty. There is no text node inside. So without text, they are not very useful. And how do we add text to them? I will show you soon. Just follow along. So create element creates an empty HTML element. Let's now study create text node. Create text node method creates a standalone text node. For example, so we pass the text to the method and it returns a text node. So it's a standalone text node that does not belong to any element. So let's see what do we get in the console. Now you can see a text node, a standalone text node is created. Now here you see we have an empty element and here we have the text for the element. So this text I want to put in the paragraph so that it becomes useful. And for that, we need to use the properties which are used to change the text content of a node. So what are those properties? Let's check them out. In the DOM, we have three such properties. So let's write them down. So these are the properties we have to change the text content of a node. And most of the time, properties are two-dimensional. That means they can read as well as write the content. So these properties are also two-dimensional. They can read as well as write. In addition, these properties can also be used to create a text node. So instead of using create text node method to just create a standalone text node, we can use these properties for creating a text node as well as changing the text content of the node. So these are the important properties, and you're going to work a lot with them when it comes to the text manipulation. Let's now look closer to these properties. All of them work with the text content, but there are some key differences between them, especially the value they return. So what are the key differences? Let me tell you. And this thing is also important to understand because these properties can make you confused by giving the impression like we are the same, but that is not true. They are not same. They have their key differences. The first property is the text content. Text content is used to read and write the text of a node in plain format. Plain text means non-rendered text, like no CSS styling. And if the text contain other HTML tags, this property is gonna ignore all the tags and will only return the text content of those tags. Another thing that you need to remember here is that this property is gonna return the text content of all its children. So that was the text content. The second property is the inner text. This one is used to grab the rendered text content of a node, right? So using these properties, you can grab the CSS attributes, you can grab the CSS styles. Now, the third one is the inner HTML property. The inner HTML returns the text content, non-rendered text content of a node, as well as HTML tags of the node. So if the text contains HTML tags, you will get those tags also. For example, if I apply inner HTML to the list, so I will get the text content as well as these li tags, right? So that was the difference between these properties. Let's now try to code them and have some fun. So here we have a paragraph which is empty, and I'm going to put some text in it. So to the paragraph, I will simply call the text content property. And now I will put some text. And now I will print the paragraph again in the console. So let's refresh the page, and you can see a paragraph with the text. Now this paragraph has become useful and it can be added to the DOM document. And the property did two different things, created a text node and changed the text content of the node. That means we actually don't need to use this create text node method, like I said earlier. The same result you're gonna get from the inner text. If I call inner text, refresh the page, and you will see the same result. And the inner HTML will also give you the same result. And here you see the same output, right? So all the three properties showing you the same result. So here you got the impression like these properties are the same, but they are not. They have their differences, and we have talked about it. So to show you the differences between these properties, we need to do some more experiments with them. So let's continue. And now you will see the key differences between the properties. So like I said earlier, a property can be used to read and the write. And here we are using the property for writing. Reading means use the property to get the text content. And here you will see the differences. When we use the properties to read the text content, then they show their differences. Now I want to read the text content of the UL list. So I need to select the UL element first. So here we have the UL element. Now let's see what happens when I apply the text content property to the UL. So using the property, we are trying to read the text content of the UL. Refresh the page, and here you see the text from all the children nodes, including new lines and the white spaces. Here you see a new line, here we have a new line, new line, new line, and here we have white spaces. And you know white spaces are preserved in the DOM document as text nodes. So when you try to retrieve all the text nodes, you will simply get all of them, the original text as well as white spaces. In the console, I can even show you what do we have inside the text. Now you can see what is actually returned by the property. The first node is the new line and a white space that we have in the HTML document. And here you see, here we have a new line, and then here we have the white space. And after that, we have the text, and again, a new line and a white space. Text, new line, and the white space. Text, new line,
and that's it. So the output here is the same. New line, white space, text. New line, white space, text. So remember this thing, when you use the text content property to retrieve the text from all the children nodes, you also get the white spaces. And white spaces are also text nodes. But practically, we don't always use the text content property to retrieve the text from all the children nodes. We simply apply it to any specific node and get the result. For example, if I want to get the text from the first li, so I can use the text content in a more specific manner. For example, we are going to target the first element and text content, right? So the first element child of ul is this one, and then we apply text content, which is gonna return only this text, do laundry. So this is a more practical use of text content property. And if you refresh the page, you will see the result, right? Do laundry. And inside the li, there is no extra white space or the new line. So that was the text content. Let's now apply the inner text to the ul and see what do we get there. Let me refresh the page. Now you see a much better result. The inner text property gonna give you just the text content of the children nodes. Other nodes are totally ignored. So this one can be a better choice if you wanna retrieve the text from all the children nodes, right? And when you apply inner text to any specific node, for example, the first li, so you will get the same result as before. This text, do laundry. Now the last one is inner HTML, and this one is special. Inner HTML will give you the text nodes as well as the HTML tags. So let me apply the inner HTML on the UL. And now you will see the difference. Now you got everything, all the text nodes, including the white spaces and the elements. And when you apply inner HTML to a single element to get its text, you get the text. So if I run the inner HTML to the li, it will return the text, do laundry. But if the text further contains any HTML element, that will also be returned. So let's say if I apply inner HTML to the first element of the UL, and you can see the same output as before. So now you have experienced by yourself. These properties are confusing. Even though I showed you the differences, but still there may be some confusions, like when to use them and how to use them. So let me give you a usage guideline before we move on. And I want you to remember what I am just about to tell you. So here comes everything in a nutshell. We have these three properties in order to change the text content of the node. These properties can write the text content as well as read the text content. So when you're trying to write the text content, like here, then you can use any one of them. However, text content is preferable. And when you just try to read the text content, only the text content of a single node, just like we did here, then you will go for the text content or the inner text. And when you want to read the text content of a single node as well as the HTML tags inside the text, then you will go for the inner HTML. It will give you the text content as well as the HTML included in the text. So let me just show you what do I mean. Let's say this is the text I want to read using the property inner HTML. And this text doesn't contain any other HTML. But there are some cases where the text contains HTML. For example, so here see I put a strong tag in the text. So now when I use the inner HTML to this li, I will get this whole text including the strong tags. The text content and the inner text gonna ignore the strong tag. So that is a usage guideline to write or read the text content of a single node. In case of multiple nodes where you want to try to read the text content of all the children, then you need to choose a property according to your requirement because they return different values. So that was all about the properties we have to change the text content of a node. So now we know two things, how to create a node and how to change the text content of a node. And when we combine these two, we get a functional, a useful node. Just like we created a paragraph here and then fill the paragraph with the text. So let's now move on. Now, after creating a node, we need to make it visible on the front end of our website. For example, this paragraph node is created, but it's not visible on the website. To make a newly created node visible on the website, we need to add it to the DOM document or use it to replace the older nodes. So let's now see how do we add a new node to the DOM document to make it visible or replace the older ones with the new ones. So let's start with adding a new node. To add a new node to the DOM tree, we have two methods. We have append child and insert before. So these are the two methods we use to add the nodes to the DOM document and they become visible. So let's have some fun with these two methods. And we are going to use this to-do list HTML. And here we have three list items. And we are going to add another to-do list item via JavaScript. And the first step here should be to create a new li element because li defines the to-do. And now we know how to create an element. So now we have created an empty li. And using the text content, we are gonna put some text in it. So now our new node is ready to add to the DOM document. And we are gonna add it as a child to the UL. And we have already selected the UL earlier. So here we have the variable we can use. So to the UL, I will call append child. And we pass our new node to the method. That's it. So this append child method gonna add this new node as the last node. Let me refresh the page and now you will see the node on the web. You can see we have successfully created a new node and added it to the DOM document. So that was append child method. Create a new node and use the method to add the node to the DOM document. Now the second one is insert before. And this one is going to add a new node before a specified node. So using this method, you can simply choose where to add the node. And this method take two arguments. The first argument is new node that we want to add, and the second argument is next sibling. So the new node is going to show itself before the next sibling. Now let's say I have a task with higher priority and I want to put it at the top of the list. For example, paying the bill is the priority task and I want to put it at the top. So this can easily be done using the method insert before. So let's create a new to-do, priority to-do. I can call it new priority. This to-do I'm going to add to the top of the list using the method insert before. The first argument is the new to-do. The second argument is the next sibling, and the next sibling is going to be the first li because we are going to add our new node before the do laundry, and do laundry is a first child or will become the next sibling of this new node. And to target the first sibling, we can simply call the first element child property to the parent. That's it. Now our new node is going to show itself at the top of the list. So let me refresh the page. And here say the pay bills at the top, right? So the method append child and insert before are used to add new nodes to the DOM document. In addition, we also have a replace method that can be used to replace a node. And the method is called replace child. It takes two arguments, new node and old node, right? So the old node is going to be replaced by the new node. Now let's say I want to replace the list item have walk with the dog with feed the dog. So we need a new list item. So here we have a new node with the text feed the dog, and this one is going to replace the node have walk with the dog. So to the UL, we are going to first call the replace child method. The first argument is the new node. The second argument is the replacing node, which is the third node. or the third child of the UL. So using the index, we are targeting the third child. So what will happen when I refresh the page? I think this one is gonna replace by the new node because we have already added a new node paybills earlier, and that means the node have walk with the dog got the index value 3, and in the code we are trying to replace the node with index value 2. So this is the node, so we can change the index value. So instead of the third child, we are gonna replace the fourth child. Now let me refresh the page and I will see the output, right? The node is replaced by the new one. So that was the replace child method, simple and easy to use. So now we have covered create new nodes, change the text content, and add or replace the nodes. The last point is the removing nodes, and it's the last concept that you need to learn in order to make changes to the DOM. So let's say, how do we remove nodes? So to remove a node, we have two different methods. So let's check them out one by one. The method number one is remove child, and that can be used to remove a child from the parent node. For example, I want to remove the first child of the UL, which is a parent. So to the UL, I'm going to call remove child method, and to the method, I will pass the child node I want to remove, first element child. That's it, the first child is removed. So the pay bills is the first child, and as I refresh the page, this one is gone. And here say, so that was quite simple. And the second method is remove. Remove method is different from the remove child. The remove child, as the name suggests, can only be called to the parent node. But the remove method can be called on any node. A node even call the remove method and get itself removed. For example, I want to remove the last node of the UL. So to the last node, I can call the remove method, just like that. So as we refresh the page, you will see the last node is gone. And here we say, so that was simple. And let's say if we apply remove directly to the UL, the entire UL gonna remove itself. So refresh and everything is gone, right? There is no UL in the DOM document, as you can see here. So my dear listeners, that was a lecture, a comprehensive lecture on make changes to the DOM. And we covered all the options that we have to change the DOM. Now you can go further to the next lecture. In the next lecture, you will learn how to work with the attributes, how to add, remove, and modify attributes. Attributes are the values that contain extra information about the element. And in addition, attributes enhance the functionality of the elements, right? So they are used to add extra information to the tag or to enhance the functionality. For example, I've got some HTML with an image element and an anchor element. The image element need at least two attributes to make itself functional. The src attribute, where we put the image, and the alternative attribute where we put the description of the image. So these two attributes are functional. And apart from these functional attributes, we can put other attributes to add extra information to the element. For example, the class attribute or the ID or the name. So the class attribute here is actually adding extra information, whereas the source and the alternative are functional. And the same applies to the anchor element. href is functional, class is for adding extra information. Now, these attributes or all the attributes that we have on a page become the part of the DOM tray or the DOM document. So the attributes are also nodes, and I've already told you that in the DOM introduction lecture. Now, to change or modify these attributes is also a part of the DOM manipulation. For example, if you want to create an image slider, then you need to put different images to the src attribute. And that means you need to modify or change the src attribute. So it's a kind of DOM manipulation. So working with the attributes is an essential part of the DOM manipulation. And this is what we are going to learn in this lecture. We will learn how to work with the attributes, how to add, remove, and change the attributes. So as usual, in order to work with the attributes, DOM provides us 4 different methods. And these methods are has attribute, get attribute, set attribute, and remove attribute. So how do they work and how do we code them? Let's check it out one by one. So the first method on our list is has attribute. This method is investigative. It checks for the specified attribute and returns Boolean value, true or false, based on if the attribute is found or not. Now, for example, to the image element, I want to find out if the alternative attribute is there or not. So I first need to select the image element, which I did here. The image element has a class image, so I can use query selector to get the element. At the same time, I also selected the anchor element. So both the elements are now available to the JavaScript. So let's see how do we code has attribute method. We are going to call it to the image element and want to see if the alternative attribute is there or not. And as we know, the image has the attribute, so the value returned should be true. So let me refresh the page and I will say the true is returned. So the value returned by the method is a boolean, true or false. That means it can be used in the conditionals. For example, I can write like if So that can be the usage of the method has attribute. When we investigate something, we definitely want to do something with the investigation. For example, if the attribute is not found, then we would say, okay, so we are going to add it. So that was the method has attribute, and it can be used to find out if an attribute exists or not. Now, the second one is the get attribute method. This method actually returns the value of a specified attribute. For example, the value of the alternative, the value of the href, this URL, and the name of the image is also the value, right? So if you want to get the value of the attribute, then you will use get attribute method. So in a program, you can call it on the element simply. Now let's say I want to get the href value. So I'm calling the get attribute to the anchor element. And the attribute that I want to read is href. Now in the output, you will see this URL. Let me refresh the page. No. So here we have a type error and I know where it is. Here is the error, right? That should be has attribute. Now let me refresh again. And here you see only the value of the specified attribute is returned, right? So that was the get attribute method. Now on our list, we have set attribute and remove attribute. The set attribute is used to add or update the value of a specified attribute. So if you want to update the value to something else, or you simply want to add a new value, then you will go for this method, set attribute. So let's now use this set attribute method and modify this anchor element. I'm going to change the value of the href to another URL. So I will use anchor and call the method on it. Now this method takes two arguments. The first argument is the attribute we wanna modify, comma, and the value. The second argument is the value, the new value that we wanna assign to the attribute. For example, at the same time, we can change the text content within the text content property, and here we can put visit eBay. Now you can see using the DOM, we have totally changed the anchor element. So let's make a refresh, and here you can see visit eBay. And how does it look here? And now you can see the attribute is changed to the eBay. So listeners, that was the set attribute method. And I think now you have realized the importance of this topic. It's an important part of the DOM manipulation. Now, the last one is the remove attribute. So as the name suggests, you can use it to totally remove an attribute. For example, to the image, I want to remove this src attribute, no image on the web. So to the image, I will call remove attribute, and here I will specify the attribute I want to remove. That's it. So let me refresh the page. As I refresh the page, you won't see this image. And here you see the image is gone. no src attribute here in the document. So that was the remove attribute method. Simple and easy to use. Now, one last and useful thing before we wind up this lecture. So here we are totally removing the src attribute from the image element. And to get the attribute back or to add it again to the element, we need to use set attribute method. So I can, for example, write set attribute, and the name of the attribute is src, and the value is. So now we're going to get the attribute back with this value. And now you will see the image as I refresh the page, right? So the important thing that I want to tell you is that some of the attributes can be accessed directly, and src is one of them. That means to change the value of the src or to add it to the element, you don't always need to call this set attribute method. If you want, so you can simply call it like this. So it will do the same as set attribute method did. So if I refresh the page, you won't see any difference, right? You can see the src attribute with the value is added directly. So this can also be done. So listeners, that was all about working with the attributes. Now you know what are attributes and how to add, change, or remove them. It's now time to move forward. In the next lecture, you will learn to work with the classes, like how to add, change, modify, remove, and toggle classes. And don't forget one thing, classes are also attributes. I'll see you in the next lecture.
So how classes are managed by the DOM and what options do we have? This is gonna be the topic of this lecture. Classes are also attributes and attributes are nodes, and you know that from the previous lecture. Classes can be assigned to any HTML element, and the elements can also have more than one classes. It's very usual, right? Now, how do we use HTML classes? We use the classes to style the HTML. In the CSS, we code the class selectors to select the HTML by the classes, and then we simply style them, right? So the classes are mostly used for a styling purpose. Now, the DOM has full access to the HTML classes. DOM can add, remove, replace, and modify them. And when DOM does class manipulation, CSS changes itself. In other words, the styles which are applied using the class selectors are modified or changed. You will experience by yourself in a couple of minutes, and you will realize the class manipulation is an essential part of the DOM. It's a wonderful thing. Now, to work with the classes or to manipulate classes, DOM provides a bunch of methods and a single property. The class name is a property, and then we have 5 different methods: add, contains, replace, remove, and toggle. So these are the tools we have to manipulate classes. And we're going to walk through this entire list one by one and learn to code them. But first, I need to present the HTML we will be working on. In the HTML, I only have 2 divs, and both of them are assigned a same class, class active. And here are the selectors I will be using in this lecture. Here I have some accessory CSS, and here is the active class selector. So this selector is applied or working at this moment to the HTML. It will give the blue border to the HTML. And I also have a warning class with red border, a hidden class. When this class is applied, the element disappears. Shown class gonna get the element back on the front end, and the text color class gonna change the text color of the text. So at this stage, only the active class is applied to the HTML. In the browser, that would be the output, blue borders from the class active. So let's now move on. Like I said earlier, when we manipulate classes, we actually start modifying and changing the CSS, because classes are used in the CSS for styling the HTML. So the first and the straightforward tool that we have to read and write classes is the property class name. This property gets or sets classes. Get means read and set means write. So you can do both the operations, read and write. Now let's say to the first div element, I want to remove the active class and will apply the warning class. So in the JavaScript, I have already selected both the divs, and to the first div I will call the class name property. Into the property I will assign warning class. That's it. Now the warning class gonna override the active class. When we refresh the page, you will see the difference. You see the red border coming from the warning class, and here in the DOM document, you can see the warning class overrode itself to the active class, right? The important thing to remember here is that this class name property gonna override the previous classes. You can also use the class name property to put multiple classes. Now let's say I also want to add the text color class to the div. I will put a space in between, just like we do in the HTML, and then the name of the class I want to add. So now we're adding two classes at the same time, and that means text color selector in the warning selector become active on the first div. So let me refresh the page, and now you can see the text color is turned into red. And in the DOM document, you can also see both the classes are added, right? The property can also be used to get or to read the classes. Now let's say I want to read the classes belongs to the second div. So I can call the property like this. Now the property gonna return the classes of the second div. So let's refresh the page and check the console. Now you can see the second div has an active class which is returned by the property. So that was the class name property. It's a good property and easy to use. The only disadvantage with this property is that it overrides the previous classes. And to overcome this override issue, we can use the add method of the class list. The class list is also a property, but it comes with several different useful methods. For example, to the class list, we can call add, and add gonna add one or more classes without overriding the previous ones. So let's see how do we code add method of the class list property. When we apply a class list property to the element, it returns all the classes of the element, and then they call a method. So the method basically works on the result provided by the class list property. So let me first show you the output of the class list property, only the class list property. So in a console log, we can call class list to the first. So the class list property gonna get all the classes of the element. As we refresh the page, so you can see the property returns both the classes warning and text color. So the class list property provides a list of the classes, and the methods like add, contains, remove, toggle work on the list provided by the class list property. And now using the add method, I want to add a text color class to the second div. So to the second div, I will call the class list property first, and then method add. And the class I want to add is text color. So there is no override thing. The text color class gonna add itself after the active class. So as we refresh the page, you will see the difference. The text color is red, and to the DOM document, you can see the text color class is added and the active class is still there, right? So that was the add method of the class list property. Now the second method is contains. Contains, as the name suggests, is an investigative method, and it will check if the class exists or not. The return type is a boolean value, true or false. Now let's say I want to find out if the first div contains the class warning or not. So to the first div, I will call first the class list property and then the contains method. Into the method, I will pass the name of the class I want to investigate. Warning. The output would be true because in a previous stage we added the class warning to the first step. So let me refresh the page, and now in the console you can see the true is returned. So contains is a boolean method and it can be used with conditionals if statements. So that was the contains method, and after the contains we have replace method.
The replace method is gonna simply replace the old class with the new one, and it takes obviously two arguments, two classes, new class and the old class. Now let's say we create another class with name text color black. So using this class, we can apply black text color to the element. So here we are adding the text color red to the second div. And now I want to replace the text color red with the text color black using the method replace. So to the second div, I will call the replace method. The first argument is the old class, which is a text color. In the second argument is the replacing class, which is a text color black. So we are replacing red with black. So let's make a refresh, and you can see the text color is now black. And to the DOM document, you can also see the class is added, right? Text color black. So that was the replace method, simple and straightforward. Now the next method is remove. So using this method, you can simply remove one or many classes. It can take a class as argument or several classes as argument. So our second div has classes. Let me show you. So it has two classes, active class and the text color class. So using the method, I can choose to remove any one of them or both of them. So I can simply call the remove method to the second div like this. And if I want to remove only the active class, so I will provide the name as argument. And if I want to remove both the classes, so I will provide the name of both of the classes like this. Now both the classes are removed. So let me make a refresh, and you can see both the classes are removed from the second div. Here you can see the second div without any class. So that was a remove method. Now the last method on our list is toggle. It's an important and interesting method. I put it to the end of the list because it needs more discussion. So the method name is toggle. And what does it do? What does toggle mean? Toggle simply means to switch between two different options. That is toggle, like on and off, true and false, 1 and 0, right? So there should always be two different options and you will switch between them. It's a very practical thing in programming, and I'm sure you have seen some toggle implementation where you switch between two different options. For example, you have definitely seen the light and the dark mode on the website. So it's an example of toggle where you switch between two different modes, two different options. So the toggle method implements the class toggle. If the class is there, it will remove the class. If the class is not there, it will add the class, right? So a single class gonna toggle itself. It removes and adds, removes and adds. So to give you a better understanding of that, I need to work with the events. And you know the events we are going to cover in the last lecture of this course. But here I just need to code an event, a click event, in order to give you the better understanding of this method. And I want you to put focus on the toggle method, the use of the toggle method. You can just ignore everything else. I need a button to code an event on it. And now in the JavaScript, I will first select the button using the get element ID method, and the ID of the button is btn. Now to the button, I will call the event listener. I'm going to register the event, which is click. And when the event is raised, we need to handle it using the event handler. So the event click is registered to this button, and when the click is performed, this function is called. Now in this function, to the first div, I will call the class list. To the class list, I will call the toggle. And here I'm gonna toggle the class hidden. So now when the class hidden is not added to the div, toggle method gonna add it. And when the class is added to the div, the toggle method gonna remove it. So it's an add and remove toggle of the class. So let me refresh the page. Now here we have the button, and let me open the document, and you can see to the first div there is no hidden class added. So as I click on this button, the hidden class is gonna add itself to the div, and hidden means this div gonna disappear. So let me click on the button, and now you can see the hidden class is added. First div is totally disappeared. So now the hidden class is added, and when I click on the button again, toggle gonna remove this class, and when it is removed you will see the first div again. So let me click on the button, and here you can see the div appears, and it will work like this. So it's a toggle, right? I hope you got better understanding of this method now, the toggle method. So that was the toggle method, the last method on our list. So, dear listeners, now you know how to use DOM to manipulate classes, and I believe you are now ready to move forward to take the next lecture. In the next lecture, you will learn to apply CSS via JavaScript. I will see you there. Modifying and applying CSS styles via JavaScript is the topic of this lecture. We already know CSS is for styling. A single CSS file may have bunch of selectors containing a lot of properties. So the main styling is always done with the CSS, but the JavaScript is also capable. JavaScript can also apply CSS styles or the properties. But it doesn't mean JavaScript or the DOM by any mean gonna replace the CSS. No, CSS will still be there, and it has its own importance. When we use JavaScript to modify the CSS, then there's only one reason. We want to produce some dynamic effects, which can only be done using the JavaScript, right? So let's now move on and see how do we apply CSS with the JavaScript. So all we have is a single property, style. So this property is used to apply styles via JavaScript. And the JavaScript version of the CSS properties is the camel case version. Okay, I have misspelled here. It should be camel case, right? The CSS uses the lowercase letter for the properties, and if the properties has more than one word, then they put a dash in between to separate them. So this is the CSS version. JavaScript uses the camel case. In the camel case, except the first word, every other word starts with an uppercase letter. So the JavaScript uses this camel case notation. So let me show you some examples. In the HTML, I have a div in a paragraph, and we're going to style them using the JavaScript in the DOM. So the first step is always the selection. So let's select the div in the paragraph. So we have selected both the element. Now to the div, I want to apply width, height in the background color. So to the div, I will call the style property and then the height property. And the height is, let's say, 200 pixels. And now again, now I will call the width property and the same width, 200 pixels. And now the background to the div, I can take yellow background. So here you see, using the style property, I can simply apply CSS. So this is our page, the text in the div and the paragraph. Now let me refresh the page, and here you see the CSS we apply to the div, and to the document you can see all the properties. I can also apply flex or grid to the element if I am intending to change the layout or position my element differently. Let's say I want to put this text to the center of the div, so I can do that using the flex. So to the div, I am going to first apply the
Next, and now justify content, center, and then align items also center, right? Now let me refresh the page, and here you see the text in the center of the div. So you can see JavaScript can also modify CSS. But remember one thing, you will use JavaScript for this purpose when you only have few properties to modify or apply. But if you have so many properties, then this wouldn't be a good option. The better option is create a class selector in the CSS file, put your properties inside it, and then add that class to the element via JavaScript, just like we did in the previous lecture. You will get the same effects, dynamic effects, where the things are done with JavaScript. For example, in the CSS, we create a selector, let's say div styles. So put all the properties inside. And now we can simply add this class to the div dynamically using the JavaScript. So we don't need these properties here directly. Simply to the div, call class name property, and apply the class div styles. That's it. So the JavaScript is still controlling the things, but now we have better code structure, and you won't see any difference in the output. So that was modifying and applying styles via JavaScript, and now you know how to do that. So now we have covered all the aspects of DOM manipulation. You know how to select the element, how to create elements, how to manipulate attributes and classes, and how to modify and apply styles via the JavaScript. So we have covered all these things, and I believe now you have a solid background in the understanding of the DOM. Next lecture is the last lecture. We will learn to code the events. And as I told you in the introduction of this course, the events are everything. If you can't code events, then you simply can't apply all these concepts practically. So if you have followed along up till now, so I would say don't miss out the next lecture. You'll see the practical use and the implementation of the DOM. I'll see you there. So here we are now, the last lecture of the course. We will learn to code DOM events. Last but not the least, like I told you before, using the events, we implement the DOM. So the lecture is important and gonna be lengthy because we are gonna cover a lot of stuff. So at this point, we can almost make any change to the DOM document, like add new nodes, remove nodes, manipulate classes, etc. So we have learned to make changes, and those changes were manual without involving any event. And when we involve events and let the events make changes, things become interactive and dynamic. For example, the user clicks somewhere on the page and something happens. So the click is actually an event. The same way, load is also an event. So we can also program a load event and say change the background color of the web page when it loads in the browser, right? So using events, we can automate changes. We can involve users and the browser. So this is what we are going to learn in this lecture. So let me first give you the outline of this lecture. We will try to understand two important terms, event and event handler. So these two terms are important and we'll try to define them. And after that, we will start coding the event. Events can be coded in three different ways. We call them inline events, property events, and event listener events. We will learn how to code them and we'll also discuss pros and cons. And finally, we will discuss the use of event object and the event target property. So that is the outline of this lecture. So let us start with the term event. What is an event? An event is just an action which is performed by the user or the browser. For example, click is an event. Double click is an event. Mouse enter
and mouse leave are also events. Load is an event. Get focus, lose focus are also events. Drag and drop are also events, right? So events simply are actions performed by the user or the browser. When an event is performed, we usually say an event is raised. For example, when the click is performed on the button, we would say click event is raised or the event is raised. So when an event is raised, it should be handled. There must be something defining what will happen when the event is raised. For example, when the click is performed, then what will happen? So that's something who defines what will happen when the event is raised is actually called event handler, right? So the event handler is gonna define the entire action performed by the event. Let me give you an example. Let's say we click on a button, and as we click on a button, the color of the body is changed. So in this example, click is an event. And what happens when the click is raised? Body gets different color. So the change of body color is actually defined by the event handler, right? So the event and the event handler are two different things, but they are connected. Every event should have an event handler that actually defines the event. I hope I make it clear to you. Now, one last thing before we move on. It seems like event handler is something big or complicated thing, and that is not true. Event handler is just a user defined function, a normal function that we have in the JavaScript. So event handler isn't a rocket science, it's just a function which is attached to any event. For example, in the JavaScript, a function can be created like this. So this function ABC is a normal function. But when I attach this function to any event, it will be called event handler. So we use the term event handler, which is nothing just a user defined function. I think now it should be clear what is an event and the event handler. Let's now move on. It's now time to learn to code the events. And in JavaScript, there are three different ways to do that. We can actually code inline events, property events, and listener events. Listener events are modern. Today, we use listener events in modern JavaScript and avoid inline and property events because they have limitations and you will experience by yourself very soon. So let's begin with the inline event and learn how do we code them. So I have got a very simple HTML, as you can see, a button and a paragraph. And what I want to figure out is when the user clicks on the button, the text in the paragraph gets changed. So inline events are directly coded to the HTML. They're just like inline CSS. So directly on the button, we will add an event attribute. And the name of the event is onClick. So now the inline event onClick is added directly to the button element. So we have an event click. And what is needed now is just an event handler. And like I told you earlier, an event handler is just a function which is called when the event is raised. And so now we need to call a function. We need to attach a user defined function. So let's say the name of the function is change text. Now you can relate this line of code to whatever I said earlier. We have an event and handler. The event handler is connected to the event. And when the event is raised, this function is called. Now all we need to do is just define this function in the JavaScript and code its functionality. So let's do that. That's it. Now see, it wasn't so difficult. We also need to select the paragraph and we can do that outside of the function because inside the function, variables have limited scope. They can't be accessed from the outside. So here we are selecting the paragraph, right? So we need this paragraph variable inside different functions. So that's why I put it outside of the function. Now, to the paragraph, we will call the text content property and put another text. So now we have coded an interactive feature. As we click on the button, the text is changed. Let me refresh the page. Now click on the button and here you can see the text and the paragraph is totally changed. That was amazing, right? As you can see, things are not manual anymore. we have an event that manipulating the DOM. So this is how we code inline events. The name of the event starts always with the prefix on in this case, and the name should always be in lowercase, right? So let me give you some more examples. We can apply on load event to the body element. So when the body loads in the browser, this event is raised. And when the event is raised, we will say change the background color of the body. Now in the JavaScript, we just need to code and define the handler. So we are changing the background color of the body. So initially, body has no color. But when it loads in the browser, it will get yellow background color. Let me refresh the page and you will see, right? The color of the body is changed when it loads in the browser. And here, you also see the CSS is applied. So click is an event, load is an event. There is a long list of events. I will try to use the most common one in this lecture and put the list of all the events in the description of this video. One last example on inline events before we move on. The mouse enter event. This event is raised when the mouse pointer comes to the element, and we are applying this event to the paragraph. So when the mouse pointer comes over the paragraph, this event is raised. And what we want to do when the event is raised, let's say the paragraph gets a border, right? So get border is the handler function, and we need to define it. And to the paragraph, we're going to call the style and then border property. And let's say 1 pixel solid red. So as the mouse pointer comes over the paragraph element, the border is applied. So let me refresh the page. Now pointer to the paragraph and here you see the border, right? So just in this document, we have coded 3 different events: load, click, and mouse enter. Load event is raised by the browser, click and mouse enter by the user. So that was inline events. Now the question is, should we use inline events or not? The answer is no. They're only used for educational and testing purpose. So you will avoid inline events for the same reason like you avoid inline CSS. CSS in a separate file is more maintainable. Just like that, JavaScript in a separate file is maintainable. And maintainable things are actually practical. There can be hundreds of events on a single page. So just imagine the maintenance effort on hundreds of events coded directly on the HTML. Now, the second option that we have is called property event. Property events are far better than the inline events because they are only coded inside the JavaScript file. But they aren't good enough to replace the listener events. They have some drawbacks and we will check them out. So property events, like I said, aren't coded in the HTML. So we need to reset our HTML and remove all the inline events. So how they are coded? They are actually applied directly to the element in the JavaScript. So that means we need to grab the elements in the JavaScript before we apply property event on them. So let's first grab the elements. Paragraph is already there and we need to grab the button element, and the body can be selected directly with its property. So we don't need to grab the body. So we just need to get the button element. So as before, on the button, we are gonna register the click event. So using the period operator of a call on click event property like this. And to this event property, I will assign the handler just like this. That's it. The event is applied and the handler is registered to the event. And you need to be careful with the function handler or the event handler. There won't be any parentheses at the end because we are not calling the function. We are just assigning it to the event. And so to the paragraph, like before, we can apply mouse enter, and the handler to the paragraph is get border. And to the body, we can call on load event and can apply change background as handler. So now you can see a totally different version what we had before. No JavaScript in the HTML. All the events are in the JavaScript file and they are the same events. Click, mouse enter and load. So let's check the result on the page. So let me refresh the page. As you can see, body got the yellow color. That means load event is fired and handled. Now click the button and the text is changed and pointer on the paragraph and you see the border. So everything is same. The output is same, but the code is much better than the previous one. So that was the property event. And now once again, the question is, should we use property events or not? And the answer is, they can be used. We can use them. They are good and manageable. But there is a drawback with the property events. And that drawback is the event on the specified element can't call two different handlers. So that is a drawback. Let's have an example on that so that you get better understanding. We have click event on the button and change text is a handler, right? So to this event, I want to call another handler. Let's say I want to inform the user like the text is changed or modified. So I need to create a function handler and we can call it show alert, and then the alert message in the function like now this show alert will also be called by the click event on the button element. So here we have the problem, the drawback with the property events. The same event on the same element can't call two handlers. So in this case, show alert is the last one added to the on click property. So it's going to override the previous value of the on click, which is the change text handler. So the show alert will work and the change text won't. So let me show you in the browser. Let me refresh the page and I'll click on the button. As you can see, the alert message from the show alert handler and the text is not changed. So that is the drawback. An event on the element can't simply call multiple handlers. And this drawback is actually addressed by listener events. So using listener events, an event can call multiple handlers. So it's now time to learn to code the listener events. Listener events are the part of the modern JavaScript and they're more organized and have better structure than the property events. So in order to code listener events, we actually call a method to the elements. And that method is called add event listener. And it takes two mandatory parameters. The first one is the event, name of the event, and the second one is the handler. So the event and the handler are two mandatory parameters to the method. So now I'm going to remove all the property events. Now we'll code the same events using the listener method. So to the button, we're going to call the add event listener method like this. The first parameter to the method is the event, and the event we are going to assign is the click, comma, and then the second argument, which is a handler. That's it. Now the button element gonna listen for the click, and when the click is performed, this handler is called. And here is the definition of the handler. So let's check it out in the browser. So let me refresh the page, click, and you see the text is changed. To the paragraph, we can try mouse enter event. So the name of the event is mouse enter and the handler is get border. So refresh the page and the pointer with the paragraph and now you can see the border. So this is how we code listener events. And you remember the drawback with the property events and that can be now solved using the listener methods. For example, to the button we can register another click and this time we would call hide itself handler. The handler is not defined, so we can define it down here. So button is gonna hide itself. So we need to set the display property to none. So now you can see the same element, the same event, however, different handlers. So there is no override. So let me refresh the page. And now what will happen when I click on the button? The text will be changed and the button is going to hide itself. So let's say make a click and here you see. So the click event on a single element calling two different handlers. So let's now move on. Now we show you some variations with listener method. As we know, in the JavaScript, we can code functions in several different ways. We can code normal functions like the one we have here with the keyword function and the name. And we can also code anonymous and the arrow function. So that means these event handlers can also be coded differently. At this point, all the event handlers are the normal functions. So instead of normal functions, we can also code anonymous and arrow functions as handlers. So let me show you an example of both. They're very practical and get used a lot. So here, instead of calling change text function as handler, we can simply call an anonymous function like this. Anonymous function and the arrow function have no name. Now the handler function is the anonymous function and it's not outside, it's inside the listener method. And the function has its own block. You can see the curly braces. So now the click is performed on the button. Simply this function is called. And all the changes we want to make, we will do here inside the function block. So the code that we have in the change text function, we can put it here in the anonymous function. And now we don't actually need this change text function. So you will get the same result, only the handler now has become the anonymous. So if you refresh the page and click on the button, now you can see the text is changed. So this one is very practical. Arrow function as handler is also very popular. So to the paragraph, we can simply call the arrow function like this. So here we have the arrow function as handler, and the function also has its block, as you can see the curly braces. And now the code to the function is this one, and we don't need this function anymore, and just paste the code here. So now you can see three different variations, three different ways to code handlers. You can simply use normal function like this, and the function need to be defined outside, or you can simply use anonymous and the arrow function. They are coded inside the listener method because they have no name and they can't stand alone. So my dear listeners, that was all about coding events in the JavaScript, and we have learned to code them in three different ways. But we're not done with that. The last thing that we need to cover is what is an event object and the event target property. You need to know these two things in order to create advanced applications. So let's learn these two concepts. They're important. And I'm gonna remove everything I wrote. So in order to understand the event object and the target property, we need to set up some more HTML. So let's have a UL with the ID to do and place some list items like task 1. We can also experiment with the buttons. So let's have a div with a class number and some buttons like 1. So this is our HTML setup now, and that would be the output in the browser. So let us start with the list item. We have 4 different list items. So on these 4 list items, I want to find out where the click is performed. Like the user clicks on the first task, on the second task, third and fourth. So this is what I want to accomplish. And why I want to do that, I will show you in a couple of minutes. So in the JavaScript, I'm going to first select the UL element. And to the UL, I will apply the click event and we call a handler function. So the click is applied to the UL, and UL goes from here to here, and it contains 4 list items. List items are also the part of the UL. And so now, using the event object and the target property, I can simply find out where the click is performed on the UL. In other words, which element is clicked by the user. So let me show you how. In the JavaScript, to the event handler, we're going to pass a parameter E like this, or you can choose another parameter name like event. So E or event are standard names that we use to represent the object. So event object is just a parameter which is passed to the function, and it has extra information about the event. So if you need extra information about the event, then you need to pass it to the function like this. And to extract that extra information, event object has several properties. The most useful property is the target, and it tells exactly where or on which element the event is raised. So in our example, we have registered the click to the UL, and UL goes from here to here, and it has several children. So where the click is performed on the UL can be retrieved using the event object and then by calling the target property on the object. So now in the console, we can check it out, event target. So the first event object is passed to the function, and inside the function we are calling the target property on the object. So let me refresh the page and open the console. Let me click somewhere, task 1, and now you can see the task 1 is returned, task 2 is returned, task 3, task 4. Now you can see the elements I am clicking on are simply returned. And it will also return the entire UL. If I click somewhere here, now you can see the entire UL is returned. Right? So using the event object and the target property, you can simply read where the click is performed. So it's a very useful concept. You can simply select the element by clicking it, and when the element is selected, you can start manipulating it. So let's say to this application, I want to program like click and remove the task. So in HTML, let's say to every li, I can put a remove option like this. So now the click is performed on the remove, which is actually the span element, and span is a child of the li. So click on the span can simply give us the entire li. So let me show you how. Li event dot target dot parent node. So when the click is performed on the span, this event target gonna return us the span element, but we don't only want the span element. We call further parent node property to the span returned by the event target. So the click is performed on the span, and the element which is retrieved is the entire li. And when the click is performed on the second span, its parent is returned. So just by click on the span, we can get its parent. So when we have the selected li, we can remove it from the parent using the method remove child. So let me refresh the page. Now click on the remove. As you can see, all of the li are gone. Now you must have realized the importance of this object and the property. Now one last thing, how do we know which button is actually clicked? We need buttons in many applications like calculator or tic-tac-toe. So how do we find out which button is clicked or which option is clicked? It can easily be done using the event object and the target property. So let me show you before we wind up this lecture. So we need to grab all the buttons. So here we have all the buttons in a node list. We need to walk through all the buttons. And to every button, we will call add event listener, and the event is click. And here I will make a variation. I will call simply a normal function, get button value. So this one is very practical code. Grab all the buttons, loop through all the buttons, register the event and the handler. Now all the buttons have one thing is common. They have the same handler. So how do we find out which button is actually invoking the handler? This can be done using the event object and the target property. So we just need to define the handler like this, and to the handler we're gonna pass the event object. That's it. Now in the cancel, I can show you the result of the target property. So if the click is performed to the first button, it's gonna invoke the function. In the event target, gonna return the element, raising the event or invoking the handler. Refresh the page and click on the buttons. You can see all the buttons. The button which is clicked or invoked the handler is actually returned. But we are not interested to the whole button. We just want the values. And these values are the text content. So to the target, we can further call text content. Now the clicked button's text value, the text content is returned. Refresh the page and now click so you can only see the values. So that was another example on the use of the event object and the target property. So my dear listeners, this is now time to wind up this lecture and wind up this course. And I hope this has been a wonderful journey and you have learned so much about the DOM. Do tell me how do you find it. Leave your comments in the comment section of this video. And don't forget to watch the 10 DOM manipulation task lecture. That lecture is a great learning resource and will give you more information, more knowledge about the DOM. I will see you around in other lectures. Thanks for taking this course.